lesson here in the Build Your Own BPOS course. In this one, we are going to finally get into SmartPOS. But before we do, there is quite a bit that we need to set up in back office so that we can use SmartPOS and be able to sell products through it. There we go. So what we'll do first is run through all of the configuration options that we've got in back office that will determine how SmartPOS will look aesthetically and how it'll be laid out on the till screen for us. Then we'll go through the workflow of creating what are called product key maps and key map sets, as well as a few other tidbits thrown in there in that part. And we'll finish up with the demo in SmartPOS, where we will see how to navigate through to find and add products to transactions, and how to pay to close a basic transaction. Before we get into it though, I do need to mention and show some changes that I've made to the product list in this database since the last lesson. And hopefully you've been able to build out yours a little bit as well, or will be doing so soon. For our training and demonstration purposes, I just needed to have a decent menu and ingredients list built out for this lesson, and for some upcoming lessons where we'll need to interact and deal with product list a lot more and need to have ingredients built into the product list. So if I open our product list here, we can see right off the bat that this has had quite a bit added to it. In particular, I've added quite a few product groups and individual products. I've moved some products around. One thing I will note is that I did a bit of research actually, and I figured out the exact mils per keg is actually not 50,000, it's 58,674. And I found a couple of common sizes as well, though these do vary from region to region. These were some of the more common sizes and quantities of milliliters per size, so I've got those set up correctly. But yeah, aside from that, I have added some cocktails. I did add some non-alcoholic beverages, added some packaged beer, added a whole bunch of different spirits. If I just go sub-products there, we can see all the different spirits that I've added between these different lists. Same thing for wine and sparkling, a few that I've added there. And then for our food for sale, you can see that I've added quite a bit of products here between these subgroups for a bistro menu, the packaged meals we had actually looked at in the last lesson, but then some different dishes here for our restaurant menu. And then if I come down a bit more, for our products not for sale, again, this is with the sub-products flag turned on, so we're able to see all of the sub-products within all of these subgroups here. But you can see that I've added 59 individual ingredient products to our product list here in the products not for sale. So these are all products that are used as ingredients of products that are being sold. So these are all stocked items, or mostly stocked items. You can see one is a manufactured item here. Actually, there's a few manufactured items. We'll get into those another time. And also the condiments and things that we added in the last lesson that are also configured as non-stocked, but for the most part, these products not for sale are our stocked ingredient products that are then used in our products for sale. Anyway, with those updates out of the way, we can start designing our till and setting some things up. So the first thing that we will want to do is if we come back to System Setup and go to Venue Stores and Tills and Global Settings, we scroll all the way over. We looked at this tab very briefly in an earlier lesson, but we will want to come over to this tab called SmartPOS Scheme. Now, since this is at the global level, this is where we set the overall aesthetic that all SmartPOS workstations within the organization are going to take on. Now, by default, this is most likely going to be set to this till scheme called Tiles. I had previously changed mine to check something out. But this Tiles till scheme has somewhat of a dated look, if I do say so myself. Feel free to test out the tiles and the classic look if you'd like to. Choosing either of those options is going to alter the configurations that we will see at the workstation level though, so just be aware of that. I would recommend using this flat till scheme, And the settings that we're about to see for workstations are then directly related to this being set here as flat. Notice that when I chose that, there are no other options to set here at the global level because the rest of the design and aesthetics are all going to be controlled at the till level. But if you did want to check out some things for classic and tiles, you can see that there are some other aesthetic things that can be set from here. But what I'll do is I'll leave that as flat, and I will click OK to save that, and we will check out the specific till level sections. So in the System 101, or the System Setup 101 lesson, where we skimmed through the workstation settings, I did mention that we'd come back to revisit some of these settings. So here we are. I will start in this general section because there's a few drop downs here that I should mention. These are all more related to the overall function and operation of the workstation. So things like hardware setups and some performance, behavioral, formatting, things like that. So starting with the hardware type and the drawer types. So we've got the hardware type in drawer 1 and 2. These are simply used to define which types are being used. So the hardware type does need to be configured correctly because if it's set incorrectly, that could cause the till to malfunction. And as for the drawers, obviously the second one only needs to be set up if the workstation has a second drawer attached. Obviously the first one only needs to be set up if there is a drawer attached, period. If there's no drawer being attached to the till, you can just set those to none. Okay, I'll skip down a bit further. But by the way, any settings that I am skipping over here are all covered in written documentation, so check that out if you do have any questions. But I will come down to this till scaling factor. This is relevant for now because this can be used to adjust how the text on buttons will appear. And below that, then we have our product name. So this refers back to those product settings where we can maintain short, long, and second language names. And we can choose here which one to show by default on each till. Alright, the rest in this section we will have to skip for now to keep this lesson rolling, but again, if you do have any questions or would like some details on these, just refer to our written documentation. So that brings us down to our design section, which is used to configure the actual physical appearance of this SmartPOS, of the SmartPOS software on this particular workstation. So wallpaper, you can probably guess what this is, but something I should mention is that the wallpaper only applies to the login screen. Basically, whenever there's no operator logged into the till, the wallpaper will be visible. So that will be displayed whenever the workstation is kind of sitting there idle. So I will actually run Smart Controller and open SmartPOS so you can see what I mean. So this is the one that's configured now, so if no one is logged into SmartPOS, that is going to show. If I change this to a different wallpaper and I actually save the workstation settings first, then if I log in and log out, you can see that the wallpaper has been changed there in real time. That's without the software itself needing to be restarted. So if that design element is changed in back office, all that it'll take to change that from SmartPOS is just an operator logging out and logging back in. By the way, I should mention that that is one of the settings from this section that will only be available when the flat till scheme is being used. If the tiles or classic schemes are being used, those would not be optional. Speaking of that till scheme, this base map drop down, which you can see is grayed out now, that is grayed out because it is only available when the classic or tiles schemes have been set. Beneath that, the override map refers to the till function map, so we'll be discussing that further in an upcoming lesson, I believe the next lesson actually, when we go through all of that in a bit more detail. And the rest of these, so the journal sorts and types, the widget panel, the sales window, and the tabs location and the ability to hide a number tab, all of that are a bit just preferential, but will determine which information will show on the screen and where it will show. They can obviously all all be changed, so feel free to test out some of the options here and see what will look best for your tills or what you prefer. Now the orientation though, this does need to be set however the till hardware itself is going to be oriented or how it's intended to be oriented, so either landscape or portrait. And lastly, we've got the KeyMap grid size. Very important, and this is highly related to what we're going to get into next or very shortly. This will determine how many buttons will actually appear in the KeyMap area on this till. Again, this is obviously, all of these settings are per till, so they can be changed from one to the next. But by default, this will be like this, 6 horizontal by 8 vertical, but may need to be changed either depending on the hardware or maybe depending on your preferences. I'm actually going to change this to 6 by 6, and you'll see why a bit later. I will just save this all for now though. Before we jump into the next portion of this lesson, I just want to point out some of the related operator settings. If we come to the maintenance menu and open the operator list, I'll just open. To access what we are about to get into, you will need to make sure that your operator privileges include being able to, I'll need to head over to the maintenance tab, and to have access to what we're about to get into, you'll need to make sure that your operator privileges include maintaining KeyMap, so that flag can be found just down here in this product section. And for when we get into SmartPause itself later on, you'll want to make sure that you've got some applicable till privileges enabled as well. In particular, obviously operate tills, but while configuring the tills and testing some functions out, you may also want to have things like manager functions, exit till, cancel orders, things like that turned on, so that you'll be able to complete all of those sort of higher privileged activities and be able to test some things out and cancel some things, and perhaps use some manager functions there as well. Alright, so throughout this lesson so far, and probably in some of the recent ones, I've mentioned product key maps a couple times. You might be asking yourself, what are product key maps? As you can see from our little talking heads here, if we really want to simplify key maps down to their most basic function, they are literally a collection of buttons laid out on a grid. You can probably guess from that grid setting that we looked at a minute ago. And those buttons are going to be displayed on the till screen so that we can sell products, or at least the products that are on that particular key map. So the key maps and their buttons are literally mapped out in back office, so that way key maps will be the same on every till that they do end up on. So we're mapping them out first, we're determining what's going to be where, and then we can determine which key map is going to be on which till, and they'll be consistent from one till to the next. We'll come to see in just a bit that there's much more involved as far as configuring those buttons goes. Key map buttons can be customized in many ways that we'll see, ranging from their sizes, colors, and even having the ability to add images to them. But the essence is really no different than something like an old manual till with programmable buttons that could all be set up for specific products or specific price points. One point of difference though that we'll touch on more in a minute is that we can add buttons to key maps that can include either an entire product group or a mix of products on what's called a key list. More on that in a second. So that explains key maps, but I mentioned key map sets earlier too. Key map sets, also referred to as key sets, sometimes as well by the way, but what's the point of them? So this is where the divergence from an old sort of basic non-touchscreen cash register deepens a bit more. We can take either a single key map or a handful of them. We can combine up to 20 of them into a set, and we can assign that entire set to a workstation, to a till. What that means is that within SmartPause, we can then access all of the different key maps that belong to that set, layered on top of each other in tabs. So it's sort of like stacking a bunch of old tills, all with different products programmed into them, right on top of one another, but having them all use the same cash drawer. So basically, the implementation of key sets provides just a lot more efficiency to our touchscreen tills so that we can get bang for buck out of our hardware, right? Now, since KeyMap sets are what are assigned to the tills, even if we don't want to add multiple key maps to a till, for any key map to make its way onto a till, it does need to first be added to a KeyMap set, even if that set only contains the one key map. But we'll take a look at that stuff a bit later. That also means, though, that we can create dozens and dozens of key maps, potentially, if we need that many, and we can mix different ones into as many key map sets as we need to. If we need to have even some tills within the same store have different key maps on them, we can create different key map sets. Maybe we need to have a separate key map set for each till. We can certainly do that. What that means is that while we can have standard key maps that will be the same from till to till, we do also have some flexibility, and we're not limited to which key maps have to be grouped together with other ones. As I said, each till can use a different key map set if we do need to. Okay, so I mentioned a concept or a word called key lists a couple minutes ago as well. You may be wondering where they fit in. They are going to come up a little bit later on when we're looking at how to set up our key maps, so we may as well talk about what they are while we're answering some questions here. We can think of key lists really just as a way to group together different products that do not necessarily have any common features, but maybe they do. But that is in contrast to how the product list is structured into product groups. So key lists can be used in a number of ways. What they essentially allow us to do is to pick different products from different groups within the product list and put them into one single key list together. So that could be, we could use them to group together a select assortment of products from a product group, but maybe not the full group. They could be used for something like grouping together the same sizes of a particular product together, or the same sizes of a particular product group. Maybe we'd like to have all of our wine bottles, just that one particular specific size, grouped together in one key list. We can do that. If there's a scenario, something like the venue runs daily specials or other promotions or has some seasonal products, those sorts of things can all be picked and pulled from different product groups and grouped together into a key list. So that could be something like a chef's daily special burger, a chef's daily special pasta, chef's daily special seafood meal, etc. And they might all be in different product groups in the product list, but by putting them into a key list together, we'll be able to group them together, and then we can place them on a key map together. There's a handful of other things that we'll get into another time that key lists can be used for as well. But really, just any products that are not grouped together based on their product list grouping can be grouped together using key lists. Alright, so now that we've gotten these questions answered, we'll have a look in back office and we'll see how all of this can be set up so that we can finally get into SmartPOS and start selling some stuff. So, here in back office, product key maps, key map sets, and key list, all three things that we've talked about so far, can all be found within this product key maps component here in the maintenance menu. So let's open that and just take a quick tour of this tab. It's going to be pretty empty for now, just a single default key map. But we can either open that one to edit, or we can of course add a new key map. However, similar to creating new products, we will be prompted to copy an existing one, which I will not bother to do at the moment because we wouldn't really be copying anything. But just know that this is here for us. It can be very useful if we do want to duplicate an existing key map and maybe just make some minor changes or edits to it, sort of like a template style thing. But I will just cancel out of that. Cancel that. We can also delete key maps that we don't need anymore. One of the things in back office that we can delete are key maps. And as I said, both key lists and key map sets are also maintained via this tab as well. We'll get to those in just a bit. What we will do for now is open this default key map and see what's what. So firstly, notice that when I selected that, a separate tab has opened for us here, which will allow us to edit and then save or discard perhaps any changes that we make. Plus, within this same tab, if we have additional key maps in the database, which we obviously don't at the moment, but if we did, we could use this drop down and we could change to a different key map and edit that if we'd like to, without having to actually go back to the key map list, and potentially if we had dozens of separate key maps here to search for an open one in a separate tab, we could just change the key map from this tab here. Now, as far as the key map name, this is what's used throughout back office, and we can actually change it using this change map name. What I'll do is I will call this one No Hats, No Stars Drink Menu. Cool, so something a bit longer there for us to reference in back office if maybe we have a few different stores in our venue, maybe a bunch of different key map names for different tills and sorts of things like that. We can put a pretty long name in that field for us. The display name, on the other hand, is what is going to be used to label the key map as it's shown in SmartPOS. And so maybe we don't want that to have such a long name. So this can actually be edited quite easily. Just click into this field, and maybe in SmartPOS we just want this key map to be labeled as drinks. When we look in SmartPOS a bit later, you'll be able to see that it'll say drinks rather than having this full long key map name displayed there. I'll skip over some of these more, I guess, nuanced settings, we can call them, for now. I want to skip down to our button details section down here and explain our 3 different button types that we've got. We have product, we've got group, and we've got key list. And you can probably guess what the main differences are just based on those names, but they will all have different workflows that we'll see when we get into SmartPOS. And knowing that they all have different workflows and some of the other workflows that we'll come to see today is probably going to help you decide how exactly you'd like to set up your key map and which types of buttons you would like to use. So when the product button type is used, just a single product is assigned to that button. Right now, this default product is assigned to this button, but we can easily change that just by double clicking on that button space and then choosing something else from the product list. Now, as you've seen in the past, in some past lessons when we've had this product list presented to us, we can either navigate through or we can use our product search function. Maybe since we are creating our drinks key map here, we might want to go with something like, I'll add our Coke, I think we've got a Coke Zero, or add our Coke Zero bottle. Now, notice by default that the entire product name is going to display on the button. And if we were to select a size for it, the size name is going to show there too. So that's obviously a bit redundant there. We don't need it to say Coke Zero bottle, but we can change that by entering some override text into this field. Maybe we just want to call that Coke Zero. Maybe we only sell bottled soft drinks in our store here, so we don't need to have it labeled as Coke Zero bottle. We can just have it show as Coke Zero. Also, by changing the size, like we've done here, in this instance, this button is going to always use that size in SmartPOS, or we could have it set to select size, in which case SmartPOS is always going to prompt for a size selection from the operator. Not a great example here since this is, since this product only has this one size. But if we add something maybe over on the right, maybe some house spirits here, I'll come and find, I'll just add Beefeater. Now this has some different sizes. But if I set that as select size, we'll be able to see the workflow there in SmartPOS and how SmartPOS will take us through to see if a button is set up for a particular size or if a button is set up as select size. The workflow will be different. Ultimately, it is up to you and how the key map is designed. You know, do we want separate buttons for each size, but potentially we'll need multiple key maps to hold everything? Or do we want operators to go through the process of selecting the product first, then being prompted to another screen to choose a size? It really is up to you how many buttons you can fit on your key map. If you'd like to use multiple key maps, if you're potentially going to run into an issue where maybe you have separate buttons for each size of each drink, and you do need to have maybe a separate key map for spirits, a separate key map for beer, a separate key map for wine, that sort of thing. Or if you do want to keep them condensed and combined onto one key map, then you could have them all set up with their select sizes and product groups and things like that. But it really is up to you. So speaking of these different workflows and the variety of ways that we can design our key maps, and I mentioned groups there, what if we set up a button as a product group instead? That is also going to alter the workflow for selecting a product, but maybe that'll be preferred to save some space on the till screen, or simply to organize the key map a bit differently. So the group button type, you can most likely guess, will assign an entire product group to a button. Then in SmartPause, we'll be prompted to choose one of the group's individual products, and then carry on with any size selections, condiment options, and so on. While there are pros and cons relating to the key map design and product selection workflows, one distinct advantage of using the group button type is that if products are made inactive, the key map will not need to be updated. Inactive products just won't be shown at the till when the group button is used. So a workflow that we'll see in a bit, the group button is selected, we're taken to another screen that shows all of the products within that group. So if a product has been made inactive, it simply will not show on that screen with the other products that belong to the group. Whereas if a product that's been assigned to its own button is made inactive, it still won't be shown, but we will have a blank space on the till screen that could be used for something else, and we would probably want to update the key map in that instance. A couple of other notes on this group button type. Actually, this goes for the product button type too, is that we don't have to click the space and select the button type from this drop down first, which will just prompt us, we'll open the screen and prompt us to select a group. If I just double click on a blank space and get our product selection window here, if I just choose maybe this non-alcoholic beverages product group, the button type in that case is just changed to group automatically on its own when I've added that group to the button. As with the product button type, we can add some override text here if we'd like to. Maybe we just want to call this soft drinks instead. We can also select a specific size number to apply to the entire product group. Again, not applicable in this instance, but if I had another group button where the products in it do have different sizes, maybe if I add the packaged beer group here, we could then set the size to one of the applicable size numbers. Notice that I'm saying size number. We're seeing the size numbers here, whereas when I had a specific product selected that had those size numbers defined with their size names, we can see the names. But for a group, we don't see the names, we only have reference to the size number. That is because different products in the group could have those different size numbers, have different names defined for them. So this goes back to something that I mentioned at the end of the last lesson about keeping sizes consistent within a group. So that way, if we were to select a particular size number for that group, they should all be the same or very similar. But I will just have that set to size 1 for these packaged beers, so it's all going to be a single bottle for those. And when we get into SmartPause later, you'll see the difference between the workflows when we do have a size pre-selected for a group, and if we do need to choose one at the till for a group. Okay, then similar to the group button type, we then have a key list. So when this button type is used, an entire key list is going to be assigned to the button, which will then prompt us in SmartPause to choose one of the products from the key list. Now, if I select the button space and I choose key list as the button type, we don't have any set up yet in this database. Now remember from the beginning of this lesson that a key list can just be any collection of products that we want to put into a list together. There are a couple considerations that we'll chat about in a minute, but for now what we'll actually do is just add one. So one of the changes that I made to the product list between the last lesson and this one is that I added a bunch of products to different product groups that are all going to be chef's specials. And wouldn't it be a good idea to have them all in a key list together, grouped together, all of our chef specials? We'll then be able to use that key list at the till, which you'll see later on. And we'll also be able to use key lists in other ways, such as with marketing and promotions, which we'll save for another lesson. But for now, I've already started to add our new key list here, so I'll just name this Chef Specials. And then I will find our products and add them to it. And there we go. There is our key list, just like that. Now, a few other notes on these while we're here though. If I go in to edit mode, I'll show you that while we can choose a specific size, which will be all size 1 by default, we can have that set to select size, or we could have some set to different sizes. Not really applicable here, given the types of products that these are, but these sizes could be different for each product in the list. But there will be some limitations when it comes to marketing and promotions that we'll see in another lesson. Just thought I'd mention that while we're here. We'll also see in a minute though that we can override the size for an entire key list button using this option over here. Now from a design perspective, there's a couple different things that we can do. We can rearrange these if we want them in a specific list order, or we can have them just sorted alphabetically. And we can also optionally change the button's colors if we don't want them to be the defaults that are used on the KeyMap. And you can see that I've previously set this key list up and deleted these items, and these colors have stayed. So I've got this one set to just some obnoxiously bright colors here that we'll see a bit later. But what I'll do for now is I'll just exit edit, and I will exit the key list, and I will select that. There we go. So there's a few other things to note here for key lists while we're here. Unlike with the product or the group button type, where we can change the product or group just by double clicking, if we double click on a key list button, we'll actually just be showing the key list itself again if we want to review that or edit it. We could also do that using this button over here, show products and lists. Just going to open the key list for us to review or edit. And we could also do that using this edit key lists button from the top, and then go to edit key list items. Now, if we do want to change this button, there's a couple different things that we could do. If we right click, we could go with add another key list, or we could clear the function and then select a different key list. From this little menu here, we also have the ability to change it to a product or to a group. Another way that we can display the products in the list, and we could also choose to copy that button, and then we could paste it into another button space. So one option there that we could use if we need to rearrange some buttons on the list, is we can copy and paste to different button spaces. Now, while I'm showing that sort of stuff, also for a product or for a group, if we right click on one, we could clear, we can change to a key list. We could change to a different product or group, or we could copy those as well. Now, one final thing specific to our key list is this key list override flag, which I mentioned a moment ago. So we just saw that when products are added to key list, we can set a specific size, or we can leave it as select the size. There are some advantages to that, but it does mean that key lists could get a bit messy or be challenging to maintain. For an example, so prior to the functionality of this key list size override flag being implemented, if we wanted to have something like maybe a key list of all of our wines, if I just add one here, I'll do set key list, and I'll create a new key list, and I'll call it wines. And I will just go with our wine list. I'll just go with our wine and sparkling, turn subproducts on, and I will select that whole list. So you can see here, because these do have multiple sizes defined, I'm prompted to select one. What I'll just do for now is I'll select a size. So previously, if we wanted to have a key list of all of our wines sold by the bottle, and maybe another key list to sell them all by the glass, so that way we'd have different key lists of all one size grouped together, we would have needed to maintain two separate key lists with those sizes configured. So one key list where they all had the size set to bottle, and then another key list where they all had them all set to glass. Or a different option, but kind of defeats the purpose, is that we could have added one key list with all of the products set to select size. But that in that case we wouldn't have had separate lists and therefore wouldn't have had separate buttons for each size separate, and we would have needed operators to go through the size selection prompt. With this flag on though, if I exit edit mode there and exit that key list, what we can do is we can turn the flag on and we can then default to select a size. So for this one, maybe we'd want to enter some override text in here, wine bottles, and have the key list override to always revert to bottles. And what we could do then is we can copy that and maybe paste it just below, and I'll change that to wine glass, and then we'll have the size override for that one to glass. One caveat for this that relates to the last lesson is that only products in the key list that are, if I open a product here, products that are in the Till's store, so have this product store relationship configured, or where the store has been added to the product, might be a different way to word that, and that do have the selected size marked as show in store will actually show in SmartPOS. That does apply to all products on a KeyMap, so they won't show on the KeyMap unless they are marked to show in the store, but that does seem to be forgotten specifically in relation to key lists. So if what I'll do is I'll turn this off for, this is our Pinot Grigio, and I'll turn that off for the bottle to show in store, and I will just save that, and I'll exit that key list. So while and we'll see this a bit later, that while all of those products will show for glass because we have them all set up to show the glass size, that particular product will not show in the wine key list. Alright, so we've seen now some examples of the different button types, and hopefully I've explained them clearly so you know the difference between each one. I'm pretty sure I have. As you can see, there's quite a bit of other configuration and design elements within this window. So I obviously need to add a lot more buttons to this key map to make it usable. But before I do that, what we'll do is just add some colors, or we'll get into some colors and some design things now, because this is looking a bit drab. I wouldn't particularly want to use this at a till. So we'll start with the top here. These default colors for the overall key map, the map back color and the map fore color, these can be set here. So maybe we'd want to set the back color, maybe something that doesn't look so bright and brash and empty. So maybe I'll just set that to a cool gray tone here. Maybe we'll just leave the fore color as is for now. Then when we have a button selected, we can control within our button details section here the individual button colors for each one using these color swatches down here. When a new button's been added, they are going to just be set to these defaults here, but as you can see, that is going to make the key map look a bit flat. There's no sort of distinction between buttons. It just looks like there's this flat text on the key map. Maybe you're going for that look, maybe not. If we're not going for that look, we can turn off these default flags, and then we can set a specific color for that. Maybe not have that so bright. We can sort of tone that down a little bit. Oh, that was for the fore color. Maybe we do want the fore color to be default, but maybe we want to change the back color to something a bit different. Maybe in that case we would want to change the fore color to something a bit more readable. There we go. Now, since this is all customizable, obviously, you, I'm sure, will want to map your buttons and set your colors in your own special way, but there are some best practices to sort of follow. So the map back color that we saw is often best left as something neutral or basic, something like this, so that the button colors can sort of contrast against it. But using different map colors for different key maps is also a little tip there that can help to sort of color code from one key map to the next. Also, just the various contrasting button colors. For example, maybe each type of liquor could have a different color code for it used within the map to make them easier for operators to find. Or maybe all of the red wines could have a maroon back color or something like that, just for an example. By the way, if we do want to copy the colors and the overall configurations here from one button to the next, all we have to do is right click. So I'm right clicking here and just dragging to a different button, and we'll be copying the colors there. We can also add images right onto buttons using these set of options down here. So let's say that rather than have this Coke Zero button be colored, we'd rather have a label of the product on it instead. So we would start with set image. We can either add one to back office from our local directory, or if we've got one saved in here already, we could do that. In our case, we don't, so I will add an image, and we can select an existing file, or we could capture a photo. If maybe we've got our dishes all lined up, we're gonna capture some photos of our menu items and add those to the buttons. We could do that, but we'll just go with the select a logo here. And we do have some options here if it's a double key or a single key size. I'll show you more on that in just a second, but I'll select single key, and then we will select that image. There we go. We can see it's been placed on the button for us. Then we do have some options for the image display mode and whether or not we want to show text with the image or not. And black is transparent, some different options here. It will just take some trial and error to find an image that fits and maybe scales nicely, and then decide if and how we do want text shown. If we're not happy with how it looks, we can then just clear the image. Now, as I said, aside from logos, if we just have dishes of food items, we could take images of those dishes and put those right onto the buttons as well if we'd like to do something like that. Cool, that kind of covers all of the different design elements that we've got. So what I'll do is I will add all of this database's drinks to this key map, and I will color code it a bit, but I'll fast forward while I do all this, and then we will take a look at a couple more things before we head into SmartPause and get into a demonstration of our different workflows. Okay, with our key map all done here and looking a bit more useful, there's a couple more things to show you while we're here. Firstly, we don't have to guess how a particular key map might look on a particular till. Right from back office, we can use this option here called layout mode to see exactly how this key map will look in SmartPause for whichever till is selected over here as the display the map as shown on till. So in addition to being able to tell which buttons will be hidden because their products aren't present in the till store, such as what we've got going on here, we'll also be able to see any double buttons, which we can't see here at the moment, but if I exit layout mode, firstly I'll show you that for this product here, if we go edit item, we can see this does not exist in any stores. So that might just be a mistake on our end. But knowing that it doesn't exist in any stores, it shouldn't appear on any tills. So if I just cancel the operation there and go into layout mode, we would be able to confirm that. Now, to show you what I was saying about double buttons or even larger, if I copy this wine bottles button here and I paste it right below and we go into layout mode now, we've got a double button. If I copy the wine glass button here, I'll need to exit layout mode and paste this all the way down at the bottom, we will have a super four button length button here, super long button for us. So that's just going to be one single conjoined button, which if these are buttons that are going to be used more frequently, it can make them easier to find, or at least easier for operators to hit that button. They can just kind of aim for this space around here, and they've got a 4 times greater chance of hitting that button, I guess. One other thing, if I exit layout mode, another thing that this display the map as shown on till dropdown can be used for is it can be used without layout mode as well. So to see how this key map would be portrayed on different tills, we can see in this instance, because remember from earlier we set this till, the grid size for this till to be 6x6, so that's what we're seeing here. But remember, by default it was set to 6x8, so if we switch to our other till, till 2, which is 6x8, this is how this key map would look there. So this might be useful for us just to make sure that we've got the key map that's going to correlate to the till's grid size as it's configured. But it could also be used if, say for example, we want to have more buttons, an additional 12 buttons on till 2, we could add them down here, but then from till 1, our first workstation here, we would not be able to access those buttons at all. And again, that is just because of how we have that till grid map size configured. The key map grid size configured here, 6 horizontal and 6 vertical. If we want to make that larger, we could do that. We can go up to 10 by 10. You can see that we can't go any larger than 10 by 10. We wouldn't be able to go any less than 1 by 1. But we can go up to 10 by 10 if we do that, and then go back to our key map there. I might need to exit this and go back in. I might just need to change that. There we go. So we could go up to 10 by 10, and we can use this drop down regardless of whether we're looking at layout mode to be able to see how this particular key map is going to display on the till selected there. Let me just head back and I'll change that back to 6x6. So if a key map doesn't look like it's displaying as it should on a certain till, we can check the till's grid size setting and then check this on the key map setting here and see how it's going to display there. Okay, just a couple other things to mention while we're here. This no condiments flag over here, if this is on for a key map, condiment lists will not be displayed for any products that are sold from the key map. If the product does have condiments attached to it, that would normally otherwise be displayed if that flag was not on. And clear across the screen, another drop down that we have is this post item action. This actually sets the behavior of the till for what's going to happen immediately after a product from this key map is selected. So we do have a workstation level setting for this, so we can choose to use that setting, or we can override the workstation setting and we can use another option whenever this specific key map is being used. So no action would mean that we'll stay on this key map tab, or we can return to tab 1, meaning the top first tab of the key map set. Speaking of key map sets, once we've got all of our key maps set up, which I'll have to create another one here in just a minute, we can then assign them to key sets. Before I do that, I just want to show that workstation setting that I was referring to is this post item action here. So we could either just adopt whichever is set there for the workstation and use the workstation setting. Either way, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause, I'm going to create another key map of food items, and when I come back, we will create a key map set. Actually, before I pause, I'm just going to save this key map. You can see that this is asking me if we'd like to refresh all of the key maps at the connected tills. I don't have Smart Controller or any tills running right now, so I can click yes and it's not really going to do anything. I'm just going to get a message here that, my mistake, I did have Smart Controller and Smart Pause running, so that has refreshed the key map. If we actually look at Smart Pause and I log in, we will be able to see our key map here. Cool. At the moment, because we only have one key map in this key map set, we can only see this particular key map that we've just created. So what I'll do now is I will close that, go back to the key map list. I'm going to add a new key map. I'm not going to select this one to copy. I'm going to start from blank. And like I said, I'm going to add a food key map for us to use. But I will pause here. You don't need to see me go through this whole process again, and I'll pick back up in a few minutes. Okay, so here we have our food key map. So we've got this and we've got our drinks key map. What we're going to do is we are going to combine them into one key set. Because as I mentioned earlier, key sets are just a collection of key maps. We can have up to 20 of them together in one key set together. So if we head back to our key map list, this is where we can access our key map sets. From here, we can maintain any existing key sets, we can add and delete, and we can assign them to tills right from this window without having to go into a till settings. If we have multiple key sets, they will be available and listed from this drop-down alphabetically. We can also, I'll point this out, we can identify each key set by its ID over here if we do need to reference that for things like till functions. Now, we obviously haven't created any key sets in this database yet, but there is going to be this default one that's been created for us and is automatically assigned to tills. And below this dropdown, we can confirm that this particular key set, this default key set, is currently being used by our first workstation and then till 2. In the table below this then is where we can see and actually configure the key maps themselves that are in this key set. So for ours, we saw just a minute ago, it was a few minutes ago for me, but in the recording, because I paused, it was just a minute ago, that this key set from SmartPause at the moment only has this drinks key map in it. And so I'm going to add our food key map to it, which, by the way, we can edit right from here as well. When I do that, it's going to ask me if I'd like to save any changes to this key set. I'll just select yes. And that's going to open the key map for us, as if I didn't already have it opened in this tab here anyway. Well, back to the key set. Now, to the right of these, we can also see that for each key map, we can set a price number, meaning that if need be, a key set can have duplicates of the same key map, but each one can use a different price number. It's something that may be utilized if there's different price numbers that are used for maybe dine-in or takeaway, so we could add another iteration of our food key map here, and we could have the price number. We'll say that this price number 3 is a takeaway price number, and we've got different prices for all of our food items if they're being purchased for takeaway, and we could set that price number there. Then at the till, we'd have access to 2 different copies of this food key map, one with dine-in pricing and one with takeaway pricing. Just one example of what we could do there, but I'll turn that off and I will turn that back to none. One other note on key sets is that the order that the key maps are listed in here is the order that they will be displayed in SmartPause from left to right, the tabs. Also from back here, we can change the key set name if we'd like to. So maybe we don't want this to be called default key set. We want this to be called no hats, no stars, and I'll just leave that. And if this key set were not already signed to our tills, we could do so quickly and easily using this assign to till button from up here, but all of the current tills are already using it, so that's not going to do anything for me. If I go back to the till settings, we can see from this default section here is where we can save that. I'm assuming I would need to restart back office for that to repopulate with the new name as we've just changed it. But that's where we can set the key set from workstation maintenance rather than doing so from this key sets window if we'd like to. But because we saved this key set a minute ago, it's already been pushed through to SmartPause. So if we look here, we now have both of our key maps available. As I said, the top one listed is going to be on the left and the right one is on the right. And this is something I mentioned earlier, is that even though the key map's name in the system is called this no hats, no stars drinks, I set the display name to just be drinks. This one in particular for food, I just labeled as food for both. So for example, it's just been called food. And if I change that back to the no hats, no stars drinks, we can see the display name is just set to drinks. Cool. Another thing I'd like to mention, is that I've been opening SmartPause from this shortcut here. And whether or not you want to do that is up to you. So I just have this shortcut that's been created, and then I've got it pinned to my taskbar. It's up to you if you'd like to do something like that. It does make it easier to access and easier to open SmartPause from whichever device that you're running it on, assuming that it is a Windows device like I've got here anyway. Another thing though is that within the properties for this shortcut, if we come to the target and come to the end of the target, I've placed this string of text, which is space / till screen space 1280 space 720. That is going to determine the size of the SmartPause window when SmartPause does open when this particular shortcut is being used. So you can set that appropriately for your hardware screen size. Just a little a tip for you there. So again, that's just going into the properties of the shortcut, coming to the target and entering this in with the till dimensions or the screen dimensions entered there. Cool. So with that, we will head back into SmartPause and run through a quick demo. First thing we'll do is we will select a single product that has its size set on the button. So for example, for these soft drinks, these are all just single product buttons. These products all only have one size, so we've added the size as the button. We haven't set them to select size. So if I select that, it's just going to add that product with that size to the till. Another option could be if we have a single product and we left it as select size. So an example for that would be one of these draft beers. So if I select this pale ale, we are then immediately taken to a different screen where we're prompted to select the size. When I select the size, that is immediately added to the transaction like that for us. Cool, so that's two different options when we have a single product button. If we have a product group button, we do have a couple different options for us. So if we go with the beer bottles, we're going to then be prompted to select one of the styles or varieties or brands of beer bottles. In that case, this particular button here has been configured for that size. If we refer back to that, we can see that that has been set up for size 1. Now these two here have been set also for one size, and then this one here has been set for select size, but that should actually be set for 3. What I want to show you is a product button, or a group button that has been set up with a select size. So one option for that is going to be if we look at our, let's see, other spirits here, we've got that set for select size. So if we go back to SmartPause and we go to other spirits, we're going to be prompted to select the spirit itself first. Not sure anyone's actually going to be ordering these particular spirits by themselves, but we've got them as an option here. And when I select one of those products, I will then be prompted to select the size because the button has been set up to select the size. When I select that, it's added to the transaction. We're seeing a trend here. We also have our key list from earlier. So I created these two again for the wine bottles and the wine glass. So this one has had the size override, or they both have had the size override set up. So when I select that, we're then taken to all of the products within that key list with the size overridden to select the bottle. So I can select that. And similarly for the glass ones, we'll have them already in this window with the glasses selected because, again, that's been overridden. If we have a key list that doesn't have the size override selected, I think I've got one here. If I can remember where I just put this. Yep, Chef Specials, that was the other key list that we've got. So here's an example of that button with the different colors that we added for it. Now these particular products only have the one size anyway, so there's nothing being overridden, but there's also not going to be any options. So if I select one, it's just going to take me to that. In this case, we do have some condiments. I wasn't ready to show those yet, but anyway, while we're here, we might as well. So if you remember back to the last lesson, when we created our couple of steak meals and we added firstly the condiments to select the cooking temperature, and then the optional condiments to add a side. So if I select our Grange beef rump here, first thing we're taken to is a page where we are forced to select a cooking temperature as a condiment. We can reference here that this is how, remember, if you remember at the top of the page break, or we changed the page break name to read as select a cooking temp. And we can see that we have to select 1 because the min and max are both set to 1 here. If we click cancel, or sorry, I do want to show this, we cannot go previous or next because we have to pick 1. And if we go cancel, it's just going to cancel out of that operation altogether. But when we do select 1, we are then going to be immediately taken to the next screen, the next page break. And if you remember, we labeled that as optionally select 1 starch. So we will select some roast sweet potato. In this case, because that has a price attached to it, if we come back to the product list, I'll just show you. I believe that's in miscellaneous mods, side options, and if we come to the product settings and to the condiments, no. Cool, so we can see that the 0 price has been turned off for all of those. And if we open that particular product, we can see that it does have a normal price of $10 for it, which is why that's been added in SmartPause for us. We'll just exit all of that, head back to SmartPause. Cool. So because there's no min or max here, we could have just clicked done before adding anything, and we could have just carried on our way. Or because there's no max, we could add as many sides as we like to. Maybe there should be a limit here, unless someone does really want to eat all of these starches with their steak meal. But when we're done, we can just click done and we're taken back to our tab. Why are we taken back to this particular tab? If we remember back to the post item action, where for both of them, we've got it set as use workstation, and at the workstation level, that has been set to return to previous, which is exactly what that's done there. A couple of other things we'll show while we're here are our package products from the last lesson. So if you remember, we have the package fix product, which was the beer bucket and wings, and I've got a button for that added right here. So when I select that, that is just going to be added straight to the transaction window. As I mentioned in the last lesson, we've got one line that's showing that package fix product with its price. Beneath that, we can see the sub products that are in it, and then we've got a line at the bottom showing our package discount and showing the amount of the savings and the discount that's going to be added to that discount totalizer. For our package selection product, if you remember, we added this set menu. So when I select that, our first page, if you recall, is going to force us to select a starter from our list of options here. So I'll just go with buffalo wings. We're then immediately taken to our next page to select a main. I'll go with a half chicken meal. And then we're taken to the third and final page to select a dessert. We'll go with cheesecake. And that is all then immediately added to the transaction. Similar to the above, we can see the package selection product with the amount of it. We can see the sub-products. And in this case, the system has actually combined our package discounts from both of these package meals. And we can see the total there in this transaction is coming to a $19 discount that's going to be added to that discount totalizer. One final thing I'll show you before we finish up is that rather than just, let's say we wanted to add 5 different desserts to this transaction, rather than coming into the dessert menu and then selecting maybe cheesecake 5 separate times, we can enter a quantity first over here, and then we can select cheesecake and just add 5 of those to the transaction at once. Okay, I know this lesson has been a bit on the lengthy side. One final thing that I'll show is how we can close this transaction. So at this point, we've seen how to design and configure our workstation more or less aesthetically, how we can design and configure our key maps and key sets, and the different workflows that we may encounter depending on how the products themselves have been configured and depending on how the key map buttons have been configured. One final thing I'll show for now though is how we can actually close a transaction. So if you notice on the bottom, we have our option called payments, and we will touch on the till functions in the next lesson. But if we open our payments window, we then have some default options in here. And from these default options, I'm just going to click cash so we can just show a quick example. Enter the tender amount. It's just going to default to whatever the balance for the transaction is. I'll select OK. The system's looking for a drawer because I've got a drawer configured. I need to change that to none, and I'm going to get an error there because I don't have a drawer. But just like that, the transaction is going to be closed. It'll show me the change is 0 because I've set the cash amount as the default there. And just like that, the transaction is closed and we're ready to start another transaction straight away. Cool, well that will be it for this lesson. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and we will see you in the next one.